As we near the halfway mark of 2019 and look back on what we played so far, there's been no shortage of action, excitement, thrills, spills, and brutal zombie kills. But in the story department, things haven't been as impactful. In fact, they've been downright average at best. And with no release date for the next title from the undeniable masters of narrative gaming, Naughty Dog, things are looking pretty shallow. So it's fortunate then that a game like A Plague Tale: Innocence has arrived when it has, foregoing bombastic action and out-of-this-world characters for a focused story during a very troubling time in history. A Plague Tale centres around Amicia de Ruins and her younger brother Hugo, offspring of a family of highborns who lose everything after their homestead is attacked during a series of strange underground events. This leaves the two to fend for themselves in an increasingly dark and dangerous world plagued by war and pestilence. Right from the outset, this is not your standard medieval fairy tale. Sure, there's loads of castles, villages, knights, townsfolk, even the occasional goose to torment, but the developers have put in the effort to mix together as much raw history with the more fantastical elements. The result is a setting that feels fully realised, but still allows for some creative storytelling.
They've unleashed the rats!
I can't. I'm sorry.
Similar to the way God of War tethers much of its lore to real-world mythos, using this historical setting as a base on which to build the story makes for a far more interesting and engaging tale. Taking place in the early 14th century, which history buffs would know was near the beginning of the 100 Years' War, as well as around the time of the Black Death, things were quickly going to, and were often covered in, shit. And aside from a short, sunny introduction, there are very few moments of respite in this 10 or so hour game, which I would struggle to even call an adventure in the classical sense. It's honestly quite exhausting witnessing the two go from one horrendous situation to the next, but that urge to get to safety is an effective method of pushing players onwards through each of these increasingly morbid situations. And while watching anyone struggle through these times would be tough, the fact that they're children makes it all the more affecting.
Do you think we are hurting them?
Just keep moving, Hugo. Come on.
Similar to another powerful narrative game, Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, these two siblings depend on each other throughout their journey. Amicia protecting Hugo with her sling, outwitting and taking out enemies as she literally carries her brother through the worst of it. Meanwhile, Hugo's only real ability is to crawl through small spaces and panic when left alone.
No! Amicia! I'm scared!
However, even he comes into his own later in the game as a vital part of the duo. And while you could argue the majority of the gameplay, which mainly consists of stealth and simple puzzle sections, is limited due to playing as these pint-sized protagonists, there is something to be said about the feeling you get infiltrating and incapacitating a camp full of soldiers as a young girl.
Do you want some more? I still have some.
Or sneaking your way through a cathedral of twisted inquisitors as a tiny little boy.
I have to find Mummy.
Of course, outwitting patrolling humans is one thing, but it's the plague-carrying rats that are the real star here. Visually and mechanically, these rampaging rodents make stunning set pieces as they burst like geysers from the ground and swarm all around you. Strangely enough, this isn't the developer's first experience rendering digital rats either. Although I doubt there was as much of this in that game. As part of the story, the rats serve as a constant threat to the short-statured siblings, making for a truly horrific and hypnotic obstacle to overcome. This is done by hopping from one light source to the next, a puzzle element that, like many of your abilities, is cleverly expanded on as the story progresses. Weaponizing the infected rats is something that never gets old. All of these lessons you learn are tested in the game's final act, which is unfortunately the weakest point of the story. Like all good tales, the thrill comes from the drawn-out mystery of the unknown, rather than the abrupt finale with the big bad. Fortunately though, there are quite a few beautiful moments to reflect on how far each of these characters have come.
Not bad.
Is that the sea?
This is helped by some great young voice work that, while may go a little heavy on the dialogue overall, considering the children voicing the characters were too young to even see the game they were part of, proves the developers' commitment to capturing the genuine innocence of their performances.
Hugo, don't look! This way!
It's a detail that, combined with the game's stunning art direction and unique time period, allows A Plague Tale: Innocence to stand proudly alongside other successful narrative games out there.
Come on, stop dreaming. The rats will be coming. We need to light the fires.